The obsidian chamber hung in the void, like a black pearl strung on the edge of nothing. It orbited Xenar Prime, a dying star that pulsed once every few hours, like a slow, tired heartbeat. Inside, silence ruled. Not the gentle quiet of sleep, but the thick, heavy kind that comes right before a storm breaks. Rows of high-backed seats curved around a central dais, each filled with a delegate from one of the 12 species that made up the Galactic Council. Their robes shimmered faintly, deep blues, blood reds, and metallic silvers, but their faces were hidden behind smooth masks that reflected nothing but the dim glow of emergency lights. At the center of it all stood the verdict, not spoken, not voted on with raised hands, but sealed inside a single data crystal hovering above the judgment plinth. It glowed a soft amber, but everyone knew what it meant. The humans were to be erased. They had watched them for decades, at first with curiosity, then with caution, and finally with fear. The humans didn't follow the Harmony protocols. They didn't submit their colony plans for approval. They didn't join the unified trade routes or honor the ancient peace accords. Worse, they asked too many questions. They repaired broken alien tech without permission. They mapped uncharted systems and left behind strange beacons that pulsed in rhythms no one recognized. Rumors spread that their children could solve logic puzzles that broke seasoned AI cores. Their engineers built fusion reactors out of scrap in less than a week. They were fast, too fast, and in the eyes of the Council, speed without obedience was the first step toward war. So the decision was made, not out of hatred, they told themselves, but for the stability of the galaxy. The human colony on Syrah 9, a small moon orbiting a frozen gas giant on the far edge of known space, would be cleansed. Orbital incineration, total sterilization. No survivors, no records, no trace. The execution fleet launched before the verdict finished cooling. Led by the Krell warlord Vorlag, a being whose armor was forged from the melted bones of his enemies, the fleet cut through the dark like blades through silk. 20 warships, each longer than a city block, bristling with plasma lances and gravity disruptors. They traveled in perfect silence, their engines tuned to avoid detection. By the time Syrah 9 appeared on their scopes, a pale blue speck wrapped in ice storms, there was no chance for warning, no hope for escape. What they found, however, made no sense. The colony was gone. Not destroyed, not evacuated, just gone. Where the human settlement should have been, a cluster of dome habitats, solar arrays, and landing pads, there was only a field of black glass. It stretched for miles, smooth and reflective, like someone had poured molten rock over the entire surface and let it cool into a mirror. And etched into that glass, glowing faintly with residual heat, were symbols. Not Krell, not Virion, not any known language. Angular, sharp, almost like warnings carved by a desperate hand. Vorlag stepped onto the surface in full battle armor, his heavy boots cracking the glass beneath him. His scanners showed no life signs, no power sources, no ships in orbit. But the air, thin and frozen as it was, carried a strange scent. Ozone and burnt metal, yes, but underneath it something else, something organic, like old blood and wet stone. "They knew we were coming," he growled into his comms, his voice distorted by his helmet's filters. "Impossible," came the reply from the Council liaison aboard the command vessel. "No signal left Syrah 9 after the verdict was sealed. They had no time." But someone had time. Someone had turned an entire colony into a ghost. Meanwhile, far above in the Council observation shuttle, a young aide named Elena watched the feed from the surface with growing unease. She wasn't a warrior or a scientist, just a diplomatic attaché from Viria, assigned to document the execution for the historical archives. But she'd studied human patterns for years. She knew they didn't run, they adapted. And this didn't look like surrender. She zoomed in on one of the glyphs. It wasn't random. It repeated in a fractal pattern every 17 meters, and at its center, almost hidden, was a tiny indentation, almost like a port for a data rod. "Ask Vorlag to scan that symbol for residual energy," she said quietly to her supervisor. "Why?" he snapped.
It's just wreckage. The humans are gone. The mission is complete. Then it won't hurt to check, she replied. Reluctantly, the order was passed down. Vorlag's techs swept the area. And there, buried half a meter beneath the glass, they found it. A single data core, still warm, still pulsing. It wasn't transmitting. It wasn't encrypted with standard human protocols. It was just waiting. Back on the shuttle, Elena watched as the core was brought aboard. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. Through the transparent casing, she could see the internal lights blinking in a slow, rhythmic pattern, once every 3 seconds, like a heartbeat. And then she noticed something no one else did. The glass field beneath the colony, every patch of scorched earth, every melted structure, it hadn't been burned from above. The heat signature analysis showed the fire came from below, from inside the colony itself. The humans hadn't been executed. They'd set fire to their own home and left a message in the ashes. The council declared the operation a success. Celebrations began on Xenar Prime. Treaties were updated. New security layers were added to every system. But Elena couldn't sleep. For days, she replayed the footage in her mind, the smooth glass, the silent glyphs, the core's steady pulse. It didn't feel like an end. It felt like a beginning. Weeks later, when freighters started vanishing near the Weeping Nebula and patrol drones returned with corrupted logs showing impossible ship signatures, the Council dismissed it as sensor ghosts, glitches, fear playing tricks. But Elena knew better. The fire on Syra 9 hadn't been an end. It had been a signal. And somewhere in the dark, something was answering.
Weeks passed. The Galactic Council returned to its routines. Trade agreements were signed. Minor border disputes were settled. The execution of the human colony on Syra 9 was filed under completed operations and slowly faded from daily discussion. But out on the edges of known space, things were changing. Freighters that ran regular routes between mining outposts began to disappear, not with distress calls or explosions, just gone. One moment they were on the comms reporting calm passage, the next, silence. Their transponders blinked out, and no wreckage was ever found. At first, the Council blamed pirates, then rogue AI, then solar flares, but none of those explained why the ship's last known positions all clustered near old human relay stations, stations that had been inactive for years, deemed obsolete after the human purge. Patrol drones sent to investigate came back corrupted. Their logs showed blank corridors, empty hangars, and sometimes, just for a few frames, shapes moving too fast to focus on. When technicians tried to replay the footage, the files would glitch and reset. The Council labeled it a virus. They ordered all Outer Rim drones recalled for scrubbing. But Elena wasn't convinced. She'd been reassigned to the historical archives, a quiet punishment for asking too many questions about Syra 9. But in the silence of the data vaults, she found something no one else noticed. Every missing ship had, in its final log, picked up a faint signal. Not a voice, not a code, just a repeating tone, low and steady like a hum, and that tone matched the pulse rate of the data core recovered from the glass fields. She dug deeper, cross-referenced flight paths, signal logs, and old human colony maps. A pattern emerged. The disappearances weren't random. They followed a line, a path that led straight to the Weeping Veil Nebula, a dense cloud of ionized gas and dust that most ships avoided. It was too turbulent for safe travel, too thick for scanners, perfect for hiding. Meanwhile, far from Council eyes, a salvager named Troy worked alone. His ship, the Rustwing, was small, battered, and held together by hope and tape. He wasn't a hero or a soldier, just a man who knew how to patch hulls and scavenge scrap. He'd heard the rumors about missing freighters, but he didn't care about politics. He cared about salvage rights. And if others were too scared to go into the Weeping Veil, that meant less competition. He entered the nebula at the slowest possible speed, shields up, sensors on maximum gain. For 3 days, nothing but static and swirling gas. Then, on the 4th morning, his long-range radar pinged. Not a ship, not an asteroid, a structure, old, massive, and powered. He approached with caution. It was a derelict station, half buried in frozen debris. Its hull was covered in strange scorch marks, not from weapons, but something internal, like it had overheated from the inside out. The design was human, angular, practical, no wasted space, but unlike any human station on official records, this one had extra layers of armor, hidden hatches, and sensor baffles that made it nearly invisible. Troy suited up and cycled through an airlock that groaned like it hadn't opened in years. Inside, the lights were dead, but emergency strips flickered weakly down the corridors. The air was cold, stale, but breathable. And then he saw them. Cryopods. Dozens of them lined up in a medical bay. Most were shattered, empty, or dark, but one, near the back, was still active. Frost coated its glass, but inside a figure lay motionless. Human, female. Her vitals glowed faint green on a tiny display. Troy hesitated. Waking a sleeper without proper med support was dangerous, but leaving her here was a death sentence. He found the manual override, wiped the frost, and pressed the release. The pod hissed open. Cold vapor spilled out. The woman gasped, coughed, and opened her eyes, wide, alert, terrified. "Where's the fleet?" she whispered, raw from months of silence. Troy held up his hands. "No fleet, just me. Who are you?" She blinked, trying to focus. Carla Mitchell, Odyssey 7, Engineering. How long?" Odyssey 7? That's the colony they burned on Syra 9. That was weeks ago. Her face went pale. "They told us it would be fast. They said we'd be warned." "Who told you?" She didn't answer right away. She sat up slowly, shivering, and grabbed Troy's arm with surprising strength. Then she grabbed Troy's arm with surprising strength. "They didn't execute us," she said. "They tried, but we got the signal. Fire protocol. We burned the surface ourselves, made it look like they did. The real colony, it left, went dark, deep dark." Troy frowned. "Why go through all that trouble?" "Because the Council doesn't understand what's out here," she said, her voice dropping. "They think humans are the problem, but we're just the warning." Before Troy could ask what she meant, the station's alarms blared, weak, distorted, but unmistakable. Intruders. He rushed to a nearby console and pulled up the external feed. 3 Krell raiders had dropped out of warp just outside the nebula. Their weapons were hot. They'd tracked his ship. "They followed you," Carla said, already moving toward a sealed door. "They're not here for salvage. They're here to erase anything human." Troy cursed and ran after her. They reached the control room just as the first plasma bolt hit the station's outer shield. The lights flickered violently. "Can you get us out of here?" he asked. "Not in your ship," she said, typing frantically. "Too slow, but there's something else." She pointed to a small hidden bay on the station's lower deck. "A scout pod. Fast, stealthy. It's our only shot." They raced through shaking corridors as the station groaned under fire. Behind them, bulkheads sealed automatically, buying time. When they reached the pod, Carla didn't hesitate. She climbed in, powered it up, and turned to Troy. "You coming or dying to stay?" He jumped in. The pod launched just as the Krell breached the main hull. Outside, the rust wing still floated, engines cold. Carla didn't look back. She angled the pod away from the nebula, toward open space, but as the Krell turned their weapons on the salvager's ship, Troy made a choice. "Wait, they'll track the pod. It's too small to hide long." "What are you doing?" Carla asked. He triggered the rust wing's emergency overload from the pod's remote. The old ship exploded in a silent burst of flame and shrapnel, bright enough to blind sensors for precious seconds. The Krell ships paused, confused. In that moment of chaos, Carla punched the pod's thrusters to maximum and vanished into the dark. But before she jumped to blind space, she activated something else in the pod's console. It sent out a single sharp pulse, not a distress call, not a message, just a tone, low, steady, 3 seconds between beats. The same pulse from Syra 9. And somewhere, far beyond the rim, something heard it. The pod disappeared, but the fire was just beginning to spread.
The scout pod drifted in silence, hidden in the shadow of a dead comet. Inside, Carla sat with her eyes closed, breathing slowly, trying to steady her heartbeat. Troy slumped in the co-pilot seat, covered in sweat and dust, his hands still shaking from the escape. The explosion of his ship played over and over in his mind. The flash, the silence, the way the Krell ships had flinched like startled animals. He'd lost everything, but he was alive, and the woman beside him knew things no one else did. For 2 days they stayed hidden. Carla rationed their water, checked the pod's stealth systems every hour, and never slept for more than 20 minutes at a time. She spoke little, but when she did, her words carried weight. "You shouldn't have saved me," she said on the second night. "I didn't save you. I saved myself. If they caught you, they'd have found me too." She looked at him then, really looked. "You're not like the others. Most would have left me in that pod. Most aren't stuck in a tin can with you," he said, but there was no harshness in it. On the third day, Carla finally told him the truth. The humans on Syrah 9 hadn't been waiting to die. They'd been waiting for a signal buried deep in their ship's core, older than the colony itself. It came from something called the Fire Protocol, a failsafe written into every human vessel since the first exodus from Earth. It wasn't about war. It wasn't even about survival. It was about hiding in plain sight. The Fire Protocol rewrites how we look, our tech, our ships, even our signals. They stop matching known human patterns. They become unrecognizable. To the Council, we just vanish. But to each other, we hear the pulse. That's how we find one another. Troy frowned. So the ruins on Syrah 9, the glass, the glyphs, that was all fake? Not fake. A message, a stage. We burned the surface ourselves to make it look like the Council won. While they celebrated, we slipped away in ships that don't show up on their scanners. Ships that move like ghosts. And the pulse you sent after we escaped, what was that for? Carla didn't answer right away. She tapped a key on the console and a star map flickered to life. A single point glowed near the outer rim, faint but steady. That's an Arc station, one of many. It's where the others are waiting, in stasis, safe. And that pulse? It told them we're coming. Troy wanted to ask more, but the pod's alarm chimed softly, a proximity alert. Something was approaching. They both froze. Carla killed the cabin lights. Outside, through the narrow viewport, a sleek council vessel slid past, smooth, silver, unarmed, an intelligence scout. Not Krell, not military, but dangerous in its own way. On board that ship, Elena watched the comet field through high-gain sensors. She'd been tracking anomalies for weeks. Energy spikes, ghost signals, routes that made no sense unless you knew what to look for. And then 2 days ago, she'd seen it. A small explosion near the Weeping Veil, followed by a data echo that matched the Syrah 9 core. She disobeyed orders to investigate. Now, hiding behind false transponder codes, she was closer than ever. Her ship drifted near the dead comet. Sensors picked up nothing, just ice, rock, and silence. But something felt off. The radiation levels were slightly higher than normal. The magnetic field bent in odd ways, like something was masking its presence. She sent out a passive ping. Harmless, undetectable, the kind used to check for debris. Inside the pod, Carla saw the ping register. Her fingers hovered over the countermeasures. "Don't," Troy whispered. "If you jam it, they'll know we're here. If I don't, they might scan deeper." Before she could decide, the council ship turned slightly and moved on. They waited another hour before speaking. "She's smart," Carla said quietly. "She's not hunting us, she's searching." "Who?" Troy asked. "The one on that ship. She's the same one who noticed the burn pattern on Syrah 9. I saw her file in the Odyssey 7 logs before we left. Elena of Viria. She's the only one asking the right questions." Troy didn't understand everything, but he understood this. They couldn't stay hidden forever. Carla powered up the pod. "We're close to the Ark. Another jump, and we're there." The pod leapt into blind space, leaving the comet behind. 2 days later, they arrived at a small rocky moon orbiting a dim red star. Nothing marked it as special. No signals, no lights, just another dead world in a forgotten system. But Carla input a code, and a section of the moon's surface slid open, revealing a hangar bay lit by soft blue lamps. They landed without fanfare. The bay was empty, clean, and warm. As they stepped out, figures emerged from the shadows. Humans, all in plain coveralls, faces tired but calm.
No weapons, no panic, just quiet readiness. A man walked forward, older, with gray at his temples, wearing a worn-out jacket with a school patch on the sleeve. His name was Dean, and he'd been a history teacher before the Exodus. "You're late," Dean said, but there was relief in his voice. "Krell chased us," Carla replied. Dean nodded. "They're everywhere now. The council's scared. They don't know what's happening, so they're lashing out." He led them through quiet corridors to a control room. On the main screen, star maps showed disturbances across the rim, ships vanishing, stations powering up, ancient sites activating. And at the center of it all, a countdown. "The fire protocol isn't just hiding us," Dean explained. "It's waking something up, something the first humans left behind. Guardians, forges, weapons that don't destroy, they reset." "Reset what?" Troy asked. "The balance. The council thinks order means control, but order without freedom is rot, and the galaxy's been rotting for centuries." Just then, alarms blared. Red lights flashed. "Krell raiders, 3 ships, weapons hot. They found us." Dean didn't panic. He turned to Carla. "Is the beacon ready?" She nodded. "It's been ready since Siren 9. "Then it's time." They ran to the central chamber, a circular room with a single pedestal in the middle. On it sat a device shaped like a human heart, of black metal and glowing faintly from within. Carla placed her hand on it. The room filled with light. Outside, the Krell ships prepared to fire, but before they could unleash their plasma lances, the stars above the moon flickered just for a second, as if the universe itself had taken a breath. And then, silence. The Krell weapons powered down on their own. Their engines stalled. Their crews looked out in confusion as their systems went dark, not from damage, but from something deeper, like the laws of physics had shifted around them. On the moon below, the beacon pulsed once, strong, clear, and final. Carla looked up at the sky. "They're coming," she whispered. "Not the Krell, not the Council. The first wave, the real humans. And the galaxy would never be the same."
Panic spread faster than fire through dry grass. Within days of the beacon's pulse, reports flooded the Galactic Council's networks from every corner of known space. Ancient ruins on dead worlds, places long dismissed as myth or junk, began to awaken. On Kestros VI, a desert planet abandoned after a failed terraforming attempt centuries ago, the sands shifted, not from wind, but from movement beneath. Massive black structures, smooth and seamless, rose from the dunes like sleeping giants stretching after a long sleep. Their surfaces were covered in the same angular glyphs found on Siren 9, now glowing with soft blue light. On Helios Minor, a volcanic moon where no life had ever rooted truth, the ground cracked open near magma vents. From the fissures emerged towers of obsidian alloy, humming with energy that bent light around them. Sensors couldn't read their composition. Scans bounced off like they weren't really there. Yet they stood, unmoving, watching. The council called emergency sessions. Voices that once spoke with calm authority now rose in fear and confusion. Some delegates demanded immediate strikes on all human sites. Others argued the structures were traps left behind to lure them into war. But no one could explain how these relics had stayed hidden for so long, or why they responded only to the human pulse. Meanwhile, Elena ran. After witnessing the council ship's systems fail near the hidden moon, she knew the truth was deeper than anyone admitted. She copied every file she could, signal logs, sensor anomalies, old human research, and fled Xenar Prime in a stolen courier vessel. Her destination was the last known location of the salvager's distress echo, the outer rim near the edge of the Weeping Veil. She found the Arc station by accident. Her ship's damaged comms picked up a low-frequency hum, the same pulse from Siren 9. Following it led her to a moon with no name on any official chart. The surface looked dead, but when she sent a simple handshake signal, a human greeting pattern she'd memorized, the ground opened. Inside, she expected weapons, guards, or interrogation. Instead, she was met with calm eyes and warm water. Carla stood at the entrance, arms crossed but not threatening. Behind her, Troy watched from a shadowed corridor, still wary. "You followed us," Carla said. "I followed the truth," Elena replied. They brought her to Dean. He listened as she spoke, not as a council spy, but as someone who finally saw the pattern. When she finished, he nodded slowly. The council thinks we're the threat, but we're just the cleanup crew. He led her to a deep chamber beneath the station. There, suspended in stasis fields, were thousands of humans, men, women, children, sleeping peacefully. Some wore old uniforms, others had tools still in their hands. All had been placed here long before Siren 9, waiting for the signal. Fire protocol isn't just about hiding, it's about preserving. The galaxy is sick, not with war, but with stagnation. The Council built a system where everything must fit, must obey, must stay in place. But life doesn't work that way. It grows, it breaks rules, it changes. "So you're going to destroy it all?" Elena asked. "No," Carla said, stepping forward. "We're going to burn the rot away, not with fire that kills, but with fire that cleans." As if on cue, the station's main screen lit up. Dozens of new signals appeared across the galaxy. Not ships, not weapons. The ancient structures, now active, were syncing with one another, forming a net, a web of silent power that pulsed in rhythm with the beacon. Outside, the sky changed, not with explosions, but with quiet transformation. Krell warships that tried to approach the moon found their engines useless, not broken, just ignored by the local laws of physics. Weapons refused to fire, shields collapsed not from damage, but because the energy fields that sustained them simply forgot how to exist. The humans weren't attacking, they were resetting the rules. Elena watched the footage from Kestris VI. As Council fleets moved in, the black structures released waves of distortion, not harmful, but deeply unsettling. Ships that passed through them lost all non-essential systems, weapons, comms, even artificial gravity shut down, but life support remained. Engines rebooted after 10 minutes. It wasn't destruction, it was discipline. "Who built these things?" Elena asked. "Our ancestors, not the ones from Earth, the ones that left Earth. They saw what was coming long ago, a slow death of thought, of courage, of wonder, so they scattered these seeds across the galaxy, not to rule, but to remind." "Remind us of what?" Elena asked. "That chaos isn't the enemy, control is." Just then, a new alert flashed. A massive council fleet, led by the High Command itself, was converging on Xenar Prime. They believed the human threat originated there. They planned to glass the entire system, council world and all, to stop whatever was spreading. Carla turned to Dean. "They're going to kill their own capital." "They always do," he said quietly. "When afraid, they burn first and ask questions never." He walked to the central console and placed his hand on a flat panel. A new sequence began. Across the galaxy, the awakened structures shifted their focus, not toward weapons, but toward space itself. In orbit above Xenar Prime, the Council fleet prepared to fire. But before the first shot could launch, the stars around them dimmed, not blocked, but removed, as if the universe had drawn a curtain. The fleet hung in perfect silence, unable to move, unable to speak. Only their life signs remained, blinking softly in the dark. On the Arc station, Elena stared at the screen, tears in her eyes. "You could have killed them," she whispered. "We don't kill, we wait and we teach." Dean looked at her. "The real fleet hasn't even arrived yet. What you've seen so far, that's just the signal, the warning." "Then what comes next?" Elena asked. The lights in the room dimmed. A deep hum filled the air, stronger than before. From deep space, beyond the rim, beyond all known charts, a new presence made itself known, not with sound, not with light, but with certainty. The first wave, not of soldiers, not of conquerors, of judges. And they had been gone far too long.
The sky broke open, not with thunder, but with silence. One moment the void beyond the rim was empty, the next it was full. Thousands of ships emerged, not in a wave, but in a pattern so precise it felt like the stars themselves had rearranged to make room. They were nothing like the sleek cruisers of the Council or the jagged war beasts of the Krell. These ships were raw, honest, brutal. Forged from asteroid cores, patched with salvaged hulls, lined with heat shields blackened by decades of travel through uncharted space. They carried no flags, no markings, no signals. They simply were.
and they did not attack. Instead, they deployed devices, small smooth spheres that drifted toward planets, stations, and fleets like seeds on a slow wind. Where they landed, strange things happened. War machines shut down, not broken, but stilled, like a parent turning off a child's toy. Energy weapons fizzled into harmless light, shields dissolved without a sound. But hospitals stayed lit, farms kept growing, schools remained quiet but safe. The devices didn't destroy, they reset, they cleaned. On Xenar Prime, the Council's high command sat frozen in their command ship, watching helplessly as their entire fleet lost power, not from sabotage, but from something deeper. It was as if the very idea of war had been temporarily removed from the space around them. Their weapons wouldn't fire because in that moment, firing made no sense. The universe whispered, "Not now." Down on the surface, citizens watched the sky in awe. No fire fell, no cities burned. Only a soft blue glow wrapped around military bases, silencing them gently, like tucking a weapon back into its sheath. Back at the Arc station, Elena stood at the main viewport, wrapped in a plain gray coat. Beside her, Carla and Troy watched in silence. Dean stood a few steps behind, his hands in his pockets, looking not like a leader, but like a man who had carried a heavy truth for too long. "This isn't invasion," Elena said softly. "It's correction." "It's pruning," Dean replied. "You don't burn a forest to kill it. You burn the dead wood so the living trees can grow." For days, the human fleet moved without speaking. They visited every major system, every council world, every Krell stronghold. And everywhere they went, the same thing happened. Weapons fell silent, war machines powered down, and the people were left standing, confused but alive. No one was taken, no one was punished. Only the tools of control were removed. Slowly, the truth spread. The humans hadn't come to conquer, they'd come to stop something worse. Deep in the council archives, records so old they were stored on physical crystal, Elena had found it. Buried in a forgotten log from the first contact era was a warning, not from humans, but from a species that had vanished long before the council formed. They spoke of an entropy entity, a force that fed on rigid order, on systems that refused to change. The more a civilization locked itself into perfect control, the more it became food for the thing in the dark between galaxies. The humans, it turned out, weren't the threat, they were the immune system. By enforcing harmony through control, the Council had unknowingly built a feast for the entity, and when they executed the humans on Siren 9, they pulled the trigger on a galaxy-wide alarm. The human ancestors had left the Guardians, the beacons, the fire protocol, all to prepare for this moment, not to fight the Council, but to break its hold before the entity woke fully. Now, with the galaxy's systems of control temporarily disabled, the entity starved. Its whispers in the dark grew weak, its pull on reality faded. The danger passed, not with a bang, but with a sigh. Weeks later, the human fleet began to withdraw. Not all of them. Some ships stayed, anchored in quiet orbits near key worlds, not as rulers, but as watchers, as reminders. On the Arc station, the stasis pods opened one by one. Families reunited, engineers returned to their tools, teachers prepared lessons again. Life resumed, not as it was, but as it could be. Elena chose to stay. She'd seen too much to go back. The Council would never understand what happened. They'd call it a miracle or a trick, but she knew the truth. The galaxy was sick, and the humans had come to heal it. Troy didn't go back to salvaging. He helped rebuild, not ships, but trust. He taught others how to read human tech, not to copy it, but to understand its honesty. It was built to last, not to impress. Carla stood on the station's outer platform one last time, looking out at the stars. The fire had burned clean, not with rage, but with purpose. The galaxy was quiet now, but it was alive in a way it hadn't been in centuries. Dean joined her. "They'll call us monsters," he said. "Let them," she replied. "We know what we are." They were not heroes, not saviors, not conquerors. They were the ones who came back. And the day the Council executed the humans was not the end. It was the day the galaxy began to burn, and finally to live again.